Sometime in 2014, an Australian police officer named Stephen Hegarty was sitting in his office reviewing several pieces of photographic evidence. The process was slow and mentally exhausting, because the photographs that Senior Constable Hegarty was reviewing constituted some of the most maddeningly disturbing things he'd ever seen. Each picture showed a child below the age of 10 being abused by someone considerably older, and they weren't simply a handful of photographs. There were thousands of them. Sometimes the abuser was female, most of the time they were male, but all had gone to considerable lengths to obscure their faces, along with any distinguishable tattoos, scars, or marks. At least, so they thought. As Hegarty continued to study the horrifying photographs, he suddenly noticed something small and seemingly insignificant. On one of the abuser's fingers, just below where flesh met fingernail, was a small, dark freckle. The same freckle was present on the finger of almost all the masked abusers depicted in the photographs, leading Hegarty to the realization that they were all the same person, all the same man. The freckle constituted a minuscule detail, but it was one that would become a key piece of physical evidence in a global policing operation designed to combat the exploitation of children. Christened Operation Prism, the operation sought to bring down the single largest child exploitation site on the dark web, whose estimated 45,000 members accessed via sophisticated Tor encryption software. The Australian division of the investigation team, headed by Hegarty and dubbed Task Force Argos, had discovered that the man running the site was actually a fellow Australian and was most likely living in the southernmost area of the country. Yet despite having a rough idea of his location, the man's identity remained a mystery. The only thing police had to go on was the 4-letter username he used when communicating on the site: Surf. A few weeks later, South Australian Assistant Police Commissioner Paul Dixon received a call from an officer at Task Force Argos. All they said was, "We had a potential target in our jurisdiction," Dixon later said. "But at that stage, we didn't know his name, who he was. We didn't even know he existed. All we knew was the username Surf." The global investigation into the website, the name of which has been kept a closely guarded secret, went public in 2011 when a German man was arrested on charges of exploiting children. This is how police first learned that the website's owner was operating out of South Australia. Having shifted their attention to the region, police managed to arrest a high-ranked member of the site who was living in Queensland. Police had hoped that the man was the mysterious Surf, but to their dismay, he was not. However, the man revealed that Surf was indeed Australian and confirmed that he was operating from the south of the country. Another break in the case came in early 2014, when Dutch police raided the apartment of a suspected child abuser and seized his electronic devices. Then, after analyzing his computer's hard drive, investigators discovered that the man had ready access to the notorious website and demanded he hand over his credentials. Using the man's login details, police managed to access the site, then began analyzing the metadata from a number of different photographs. Almost all of them had been taken by the exact same make and model of camera, a compact variety of Panasonic. Wherever Surf was acquiring his illegal content, more than 90% of it appeared to be coming from the exact same source. Officers from Task Force Argos began trawling the internet for any other mentions of a user named Surf. It took weeks, but they found one. On a forum dedicated to discussion between owners of four-wheel drive vehicles, officers discovered that several posts had been written by a user named Surf. Surf claimed to be an experienced off-roader and appeared highly opinionated regarding the best kinds of tires and suspension to use to ensure a vehicle was truly suitable for all terrains. But what officers noticed almost immediately was the near-identical style of typing. It was undoubtedly the same Surf from the infamous unnamed website. They just had to find proof. 2 days later, after trawling through thousands of Surf posts and comments, police made a breakthrough. Many of the links Surf had posted were broken and brought back nothing but 404 pages. But one worked, and that one was all they needed. Officers found themselves staring at a Volkswagen Amarok, a crew cab pickup truck produced by VW since 2010. But most importantly, the truck's registration plate was visible, and after plugging it into the national database, a single name came back: Shannon McCool. Following a preliminary background check, police made a truly harrowing discovery. Shannon McCool, one of the biggest purveyors of child exploitation material on the planet, had been working with children and young people through various volunteer programs for the better part of a decade. But what's worse is at the time of the background check, Shannon was a full-time employee of South Australia's Department for Child Protection, meaning he had direct access to dozens of highly vulnerable children. Officers from Task Force Argos leapt into action, gathering as much data and evidence on McCool as possible. If they wanted to guarantee a conviction, they needed as strong a case as possible, but that meant biding their time and allowing McCool to continue operating the site, causing irreparable harm to an untold number of innocent children. As the investigation progressed, police made yet another disturbing discovery. During the summer of 2013, an anonymous tipster contacted Shannon's employer, the Department for Child Protection, claiming he'd made an inappropriate comment regarding one of the children in his case. Shannon was suspended for 3 months pending an official investigation, but incredibly, was permitted to return to work following vehement denials and a general lack of evidence. Investigating police officers were understandably nauseated by these new details, and it was clear that McCool posed a clear and present threat to the safety of children everywhere. But it was also through their careful analysis of McCool and his likeness that they made their biggest breakthrough yet. One of the officers from Task Force Argos had been given a very unusual task. He was charged with identifying which of McCool's social media photos showed his hands in any kind of detail. Since the abusers present in the photographic evidence went to great lengths to conceal their faces, the only thing that truly set them apart were their hands, or more specifically, their fingers. This meant the officer in question spent hours upon hours cropping images of McCool's hands, along with the appendages of many others suspected in the trafficking or exploitation of children. These images were then painstakingly digitally enhanced until ready to be used as possible identifiers for the abusers in the photographs. Then one day, Senior Constable Stephen Hegarty came to visit the officer at his station to see how he was progressing. The officer was in the process of enhancing images of McCool's hands, and as Hegarty reviewed them, his jaw quietly dropped. On Shannon's middle finger, just below where flesh met fingernail, was a small, dark freckle. It was him, the man from the photographs. It was Shannon. He wasn't just one of the largest purveyors of child exploitation material on the face of the earth. He was directly involved in its creation, all whilst having direct access to some of the most vulnerable young people in Australia. As we've already mentioned, the decision was made not to apprehend Shannon immediately. Police wished to covertly collate evidence on Shannon without alerting him to the investigation, as doing so might give him a chance to warn others or destroy key evidence. But after it was discovered that he was not only an employee of South Australia's Department of Child Protection, but was active in the sickening exploitation of children, police realized that they had no choice but to arrest him as soon as possible. Yet to do so successfully, without Shannon destroying any evidence, police had to plan a delicate but decisive operation. There are certain programs and techniques a person can use to render their devices completely useless to us, one officer explained. It doesn't matter who you are, you're not getting in. And if that had happened in our case, there's no way we'd have obtained the same kind of result we achieved. Our timing and subtlety were beyond crucial to the overall success of this operation. Finally, on the evening of June 10, 2014, Shannon McCool was sitting at home, presumably overseeing his evil empire, when he heard a gentle knocking on his front door. He got up from his chair, neglecting to close his laptop, then walked to the front door to see who was knocking. From the sound of the knock, it could have been a neighbor, a cold caller, maybe even a friend or a relative. But when he opened the door and found no one to be seen, he stepped outside to take a look around. The moment his shoe touched the concrete, Senior Constable Hegarty ambushed him, shoved him up against a wall before forcibly sitting him down. McCool was then informed that he was under arrest, and reminded of his right to remain silent, but he didn't say a thing. Hegarty later said that McCool appeared shell-shocked, almost as if he hadn't expected any kind of legal repercussions whatsoever. Yet as law enforcement's reasons for raiding his address became obvious, McCool turned pale and stared into space as if drifting off into catatonia. He was finished. Life as he knew it was about to change forever. Within minutes of McCool's apprehension, officers from a vast array of Australian policing agencies were swarming around his apartment. Senior Constable Hegarty had been the first into the lounge. There, on a small brown coffee table, sat McCool's Toshiba laptop, still connected to an external hard drive that no doubt contained a trove of sickening material. Hegarty found that McCool was running a sophisticated variety of encryption software, but it was one that cybercrime detectives were quite easily able to bypass, and once they did, it was simply a case of clicking a few links before officers gained full access to one of the largest caches of child exploitation material ever uncovered. Police even recovered the same Panasonic digital camera used to produce the vast majority of McCool's collection, meaning the case against him would be even easier to prosecute. It took Task Force Argos almost 2 weeks to identify just 7 victims from the thousands upon thousands of obscene photographs. It was a slow, painstaking process, and much of it involved contacting the children's charities that McCool had been involved in. Most kept detailed files on the children that had been in their care, and after hundreds were delivered to their offices, Constable Hegarty and Task Force Argos set about physically comparing the children with those found in McCool's content. 7 of them were physically identical to those in the Department of Child Protection's files. I was satisfied that there were 7 victims, Constable Hegarty later said. We examined everything, cross-referenced times and dates the children were under his care. It all matched. The worst thing is, we don't even know if that was all of them. There could have been more. We can never be 100% sure. Another piece of evidence Task Force Argos had to fall back on was an exact handwriting match between McCool's and certain pieces of writing displayed in the photographs. It's common practice among those who manufacture these indecent images of children to create so-called proof pictures. Creators use several different techniques, but one involves a handwritten message from the abuser, detailing the date, time, or their username. This was the technique McCool used, and it provided evidence that Task Force Argos were only too happy to add to their already burgeoning arsenal. I think I identified 14 photographs where he had handwritten something on a post-it or a piece of paper, Constable Hegarty explained. He would actually place these notes on the child just prior to or during the abuse taking place. From examples of handwriting taken from his house, we managed to compare it to that in the images. Again, it was a dead match. Once McCool realized just how much evidence was stacked against him, he offered his complete cooperation with the ongoing investigation. Hegarty accepted the offer, but it wasn't a confession he was interested in. Task Force Argos had more than enough to put him away for life, so the one thing McCool had to offer them were the identities of the remaining children he was documented as abusing. He agreed to interview with Constable Hegarty. With the several other officers gathered in the adjacent room, a lengthy question-and-answer session commenced. The priority was identifying the remaining kids, Hegarty said, and at that stage, I was confident that we were going to get the right result. He told us 4 names, then claimed that he couldn't remember any of the others, of which there were dozens. McCool also answered questions regarding the dark web hell trove that he owned and operated, and although he tried to minimize his involvement in the actual abuse, some of his responses shook even veteran officers to their core. When asked how involved he was with the day-to-day running of the website, McCool stunned those in attendance by explaining the sense of pride his sickening collection gave him. It was bizarre, one of the witnesses explained. After the first interview, we just sat in the car park for a while, unable to speak. I think we were just a bit blown away by the magnitude of what McCool had said. After 2 more hour-long interviews, Hegarty realized just how manipulative and malevolently intelligent McCool really was. His methods were shrewd, to say the least, he explained. I think this is one reason why his victim range was so young. As soon as he thought a child would be capable of reporting anything, he would shy away from them. he would be very selective of who he targeted as victims. Constable Hegarty had no doubts that McCool would have continued abusing children if he hadn't been apprehended. He was waiting for his next opportunity, that's my honest belief. It might have taken another 6 months, it might have taken another 2 years, but given the opportunity, he would have offended again. Following his sentencing hearing on August 7th of 2015, McCool was sentenced to 35 years in prison, with a non-parole period of 28 years. However, in April of 2018, his 35-year sentence was reportedly reduced by 2 to 3 years after he assisted in the identification and capture of a prolific Danish criminal. After learning of the sentence reduction, the father of one of McCool's victims spoke to a journalist from Australia's ABC News. "I don't like that he is getting a re-sentence because he has got no remorse at all," the man said. "He didn't even say thank you. He was sitting there with a smug smile on his face the whole time." I suggest to McCool and any other person who has ever hurt a child to stand up and start thinking about the children and stop thinking about themselves. These children are living with a lifetime of hurt, while their abusers get 3 meals a day and a roof over their head. Usually, prisoners who help police capture their fellow criminals are greatly rewarded for their efforts. The presiding judge could have given Shannon McCool a much greater discount on his sentence. Instead, he defended his decision to grant just 2 to 3 years. "Your cooperation has not been complete, particularly relating to a serious matter in this jurisdiction," he said. "That does not reduce your discount, but shows that there are matters that you still keep secret. Your contrition and remorse remain equivocal and uncertain." Perhaps, in this case, the judge is onto something. Shannon McCool has since claimed to be repentant of his actions, and has professed a desire to continue his cooperation with the authorities. But in all likelihood, his motivations amount to little more than a desire for self-preservation. Perhaps the best insight into how Shannon truly feels regarding his crimes against humanity is a 5-word comment that he left on his website's message board. The comment reads, "Abusing children should be acceptable."
I've been on the deep web many times before, but the creepiest thing that ever happened to me took place about a year ago. One night, I was especially bored, and I was in a chat room where a user sent me a link to a game. He said it was a sort of code-breaking game, and I had heard about some of those in the past, and I wanted to know what they were like. When I got the link, I clicked on it, and it led me to an all-black screen with yellow letters that said "Begin." I clicked it and nothing happened for quite some time. There was just text on the screen that said "Wait." It took a few minutes, but finally the game started. Things started out relatively normal. There was a few sort of codes that were easy to figure out, and suddenly the game seemed to stop. The screen just went black and it was a little strange, but I moved on at that point. I got off my computer and went to do other stuff. 2 days went by, and I got a random letter in the mail. I opened it up to see a blank white piece of paper folded up. When I unfolded it, it revealed a web address. I went on my browser that I used to access the deep web, and I typed in the address. I realized that it seemed to be a continuation of the game that I had been playing. It had a button on it which I clicked. Then it started playing a video. It was a surveillance video of some kind. The more I watched it, the more I could tell it was a Walmart. The video followed someone walking into the store eventually. It was security camera footage, so the quality wasn't the greatest, but after about 5 seconds, I realized the person it was showing was myself. I had been to the store the day before, and the video followed me throughout the store, and even showed me checking out and leaving. It then changed to a gas station security camera, a gas station that I had also been to the day before. It showed me getting gas and once again leaving. The video then ended, and after that the web page went all black. Text then appeared on the screen saying, "Level 2, and then an option to begin. I didn't have any interest in playing this game any longer, and I exited out of my web browser. I was pretty creeped out, but I knew the dangers of the deep web, and that these sort of things could be done, so after that I decided to stay away from it for a while. I do sometimes wonder, though, what level 2 was." This story takes place a few years ago when I was in high school. I was about 15 at the time and was home with my older brother who was a senior in high school. It was a rainy night and our parents were both gone. We were sort of bored and had always been a little curious about the deep web, so we decided to go on it and give it a try. My brother said he knew how to access it, and we used an old computer in the basement because we were afraid of potentially getting hacked or something. Still, we were very curious, so after my brother was able to get into the deep web, we searched around some random stuff before finding a chat room. We talked a little bit in the chat room to some people, and before long, we were sent a link by a user with no context. I warned my brother not to click the link, but he did anyways. As soon as it was clicked, the computer locked up. Then the screen went all black. It caused the whole room to go pitch black, as we had all the lights off in the basement and could only hear rain falling from outside. We thought the link had crashed the computer and maybe even broke it. I figured it was some sort of prank by the user. My brother tried pressing several keys and even moving the mouse around, but nothing happened. We decided to leave the basement and went back upstairs, thinking we had broken the old computer. We discussed what to do for a couple minutes and then went back downstairs. But when we entered the room that the computer was in, we froze. The computer screen had what appeared to be a man in a really creepy clown mask with a black background. He was just staring into the screen and smiling. We thought it was some sort of creepy video, until the clown pointed at my brother. My brother moved farther away, and the clown continued to point at him as my brother went across the room. This caused my heart to start pounding. The clown then turned and pointed at me, and then waved his finger for me to come closer to the screen. My brother then quickly ran up and covered the webcam that we had on our computer. Then he yelled at me to turn off the computer. I ran up and pressed the power button, but the clown stayed on the screen. Nothing was happening. I then went to the wall and unplugged the whole power strip from the wall outlet, and the computer finally turned off. We both had to take a minute or two to catch our breath. We left the old computer in the basement unplugged for a few days, but afterwards it seemed to work just fine. When I was a little younger, I had just gotten my own place for the first time, and I went on the deep web for the first time as well. I had heard about it for a long time when I was a kid, and I guess my curiosity eventually got the better of me. When I went on, I searched for games because I wanted to know the kind of games that were on the deep web. I've always been a bit of a gamer. I explored many different websites, just kind of browsing around. They had a lot of pretty normal types of games, and then a few weird ones as well. Over the next week or so, I explored the deep web and played around with a few games. Then one day, I came across this really weird looking game that was sent to me in one of the gaming forums I went on. I clicked on the game, and I saw that the graphics were sort of crude and looked like the 3D graphics from an early 90s video game. I decided to play the game, and when it started, I was a character in a house. I walked around the house for a little bit, and realized that the house in the game looked exactly like my house in real life. Obviously, the graphics weren't the best, but it was blowing my mind how accurate it was. Things from tables and chairs to where my TV and couch were was completely accurate. I was getting really creeped out the more I walked around the house in the game, and I didn't know how this was possible for anyone to know all this information. Then out of nowhere in the game, I saw another user come in. It was someone wearing all black and a ski mask, and they were in my house. I started to run away from them in the game, and then it started to glitch out really bad. The game ended up freezing up and then crashing about a minute later. The experience was enough for me to want to be done with the deep web. I ended up deleting the browser I'd used to go on it after that. A couple of days later, though, I woke up in the middle of the night to a notification on my phone. It was my doorbell security camera detecting activity at the front door. I nervously clicked on it to see what it could be, hoping for nothing. But when I clicked it, I saw a man dressed in all black and a ski mask walking up to the front door. He just stood there for a little while and looked into the camera. He then waved slowly and turned around and walked away. I kept watching, but he didn't return. I stayed up the rest of the night And since that incident, I haven't had any interest in going back on the deep web.